What if the only thing standing between your mix sounding flat and sounding like a record that's full of life was just the preamp you chose? K-Strip gives you 3 classic flavors of preamp saturation that emulate the gold standard preamps that we've used on records for a long time, but which one actually fits my song best? Well, that's what we're about to find out today. So first, we're going to dial in some saturation settings on the default N module on different elements of the song, and then we're going to enable Global Link to switch between the N, S, and A models. And as Global Link suggests, you can do this seamlessly without having to try and match the settings. Once we've got versions of the song with 3 different preamps, we're going to listen back to them and see if we can hear any subtle differences. One last note before we dive in, I will be bypassing both the EQ and compression modules as we are only focusing on preamp saturation in this video. All right, so I have the song loaded up into Pro Tools here. As usual, I'm just going to show you what it sounds like without anything on it, and then we'll start to add the N style preamp. So the word I'm going to use to kind of just describe how these sounds right now is very gooey. Everything kind of seems meshed together. There's kind of a lack of character and a lack of life. So because these are intended to be live instruments, I want to make sure that we encapsulate some aggression and some natural, character that you'd expect with a live performance. All right, so let's start with the drums. We're going to put K-Strip on there. I'm going to turn off the EQ and compressor because, like I said, we're not going to be using that. And we're going to be strictly using the N set of preamps for this rough mix. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to turn on the preamp. I am going to turn on auto gain this time. I didn't do it in the last video, and I don't want people to think that I'm trying to make something louder, so we'll just do that and we'll go for a strict harmonic character. Already I'm liking how that sounds. So with odd and even harmonics, think of it this way. Odd harmonics are supposed to sound a little bit more aggressive, whereas even harmonics are meant to sound more musical and soothing. So obviously with drums, we want to encapsulate a little bit of aggression, so we're going to add some of that odd harmonic. So even though I had auto gain on, I did trim it up a little bit just to kind of match the perceived loudness. Even if it is level matched, I want that perceived loudness so we're not making it sound quieter or louder in the mix. So synth keys, here we go. Even harmonics on this one. Moving on to the organ. So the pre on the organ sounds really good. It adds a really cool character to like the flutteriness of like I think it's like a tremolo. I don't know what the word would be, but just the organ sound, the character that you would expect from an organ. All right, so now moving on to acoustic guitar. Copy that down. Unbypass, we got the pre on, and let's kind of just listen solo, see how it sounds. It's bringing out a lot of the picking. Maybe we high pass some of that, get rid of that boominess in the picking. Definitely helps. Like I said, if you want it to sound musical, add even harmonics. This is why you shouldn't listen to things soloed and make decisions based on that. I actually really like how the picking is coming through because it is a support instrument, and kind of knowing that the acoustic is there by just kind of hearing the rhythm of it, it's very rhythmic, and I don't want to mask that out too much. But yeah, adding a little bit of drive to that was really cool. Now we have this like reverbed out guitar, which only happens in the second half here. So let's drag one of these down. Adding drive to that. I love adding drive to things after reverb. It produces some really cool effects. So yeah, I think you should try it if you haven't yet. Anyways, moving on to kind of like the surf guitar. This is kind of like a low register, just like a support guitar. Even harmonics. Bass guitar. Oh yeah. Now, because this is where some of the aggression lives, I actually probably would add odd harmonics to something like this. Bring out that picking. Awesome. Now moving on to the Juno. I'll have to see what this is. Oh, so this is like kind of like the side chained pad. So after listening, this actually already has some of the Juno saturation baked in. I can hear it. So we don't really need to add something there. And then this one is a little bit more drivey. So I actually am going to add that one, and we'll kind of scoot these up. Wow, you can really hear it in the pluck. Obviously, I have it absolutely cranked right now, but... All right, let's listen to it in the mix. All right, and just for kicks and giggles, let's listen to everything that we have bypassed first, and then I'll turn it on halfway through. Off. On. Off. On. Awesome. Now we'll click and drag everything down. I had to go through, and I just did this off camera just because it was the boring part, and turn on global link. I should have done that in the beginning, but you know, you win some, you lose some. All right, now we're just going to open K-Strip and switch to the A module on everything. All right, so just like we did with the N style module, I'm going to do everything bypass first, and then I'm going to jump it in and unbypass it halfway through. So this is off. And engaged. And we're going to open all these modules and switch them to the S module. So this is with the K-Strip pre's off. And on. All right, so now we're going to listen to these back-to-back rapid fire just so we can kind of compare the characteristics. So this is the N module. A. S. All right, so now that we've listened to all three of them, let's talk about the characteristics and the differences of them really quick that I heard. So the N style pre, to me, was really, really good on kind of like the hi-fi instruments or the things that have a little bit more high frequency focus, like the Juno and things like that. I did like what it did to the drums too. And then moving on to the A style, the drum saturation here was actually my favorite. It was definitely way more aggressive, and I really like how it sounded. I think that the A style is just a beast on drums. In this use case, I think I would go for A. And then moving on to S, I really like how this treated the pads and the bass. Like, it had a really musical, smooth element to it. And this is a sound that I've used a lot with hardware units. And now, obviously, this was just an experiment, and I wouldn't use the same saturation on every single element of a song. I would pick and choose the right tools, and that's what I really like about K-Strip, is you have the different flavors that, to me, is, you know, some of them are better for other use cases. And yeah, so I would use all three in this song, and I would use N on like the hi-fi stuff. Definitely if there was vocals. If I had the overheads separate, I might use them on overheads. The Juno, I really like what it did to like the top end crispness. With the A style, it absolutely murked the drums, and I love it. I love that like really filthy sound, really, really gritty. Love that. And then S did some really cool stuff with like the lower register pads and the keys bass. So if I was mixing this for real, I would have actually used all three of these. But if the challenge was to pick the N mix group, A mix group, or S mix group, where I could only use one across the board, I would have gone with S. It was very smooth. It was very musical, but it still kind of gave me that like raw characteristic that I would expect out of something like these drums, right? Or this bass. And because the drums are samples and they're not actually played and recorded live, I think that it did a really good job doing that. I had a lot of fun with this one. K-Strip has a free trial. Go try it out. Bring some life into your tracks. And yeah, I'm Luke. Thanks, Kiive, for having me. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you guys next time. See you later.